the post-medieval and modern period, there has been some interest in the archaeology of children, notably in the identification of toys by finds researchers such as the late Jeff Egan, and in the study of children's burials. Those commemorated on churchyard memorials have also attracted a little attention. There is much more to do on this, and I have some ongoing research on the subject, but that's not the concern of my talk today. One of the challenges has been identifying how children's presence and its archaeological imprint can be identified. And here is an example from contemporary of archaeology where we can compare observed behaviour with its archaeological signature created over a period of 30 years. So, children as visible in a particular place, in this case Castell Henllys in Wales. During extensive excavations from 1981 at the Iron Age site of Castell Henllys, several reconstructed buildings were erected on the exact site of the original structures, and these have been used for public interpretation and schools education purposes since that time. Excavation of two of these reconstructed roundhouses took place in 2018 and 19. They're marked with the arrows on the aerial photograph. After they'd been dismantled and before new reconstructions were erected on the same site. Here we have the excavation of 20th century structures and associated deposits, scientifically designed reconstructions on the exact site of Iron Age roundhouses that had stood for 3 decades, with deposits that formed as a byproduct of activities on the site. The excavations were to examine the 20th century archaeology of the reconstructions, to enable more nuanced rebuilding by the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park, and also to investigate the archaeological signature of these model buildings to compare with prehistoric remains, suggesting that the footprint aspects of the reconstruction were accurate. But other aspects of the research are even more clearly those of contemporary archaeology. This is the first roundhouse to be erected in 1982 and now called the Cookhouse, and the other of interest is called the Earthwatch, after the volunteer group that helped to build it in 1984. A small number of artefacts was expected to, as the buildings had been apparently kept clean throughout. So surface finds were located by roundhouse quadrant, but stratified finds were to be located in 3 dimensions and by context. However, the density of finds was unanticipated, so for the richer deposits they were bagged by 30 centimetre areas. Children visit Castell Henllys in 2 roles, as class members with their teachers and as family members with their parents. As both excavated buildings were closely associated with supporting school activities, and children in families generally enter all the buildings, the possibility of children being represented archaeologically became an issue of interest during the excavation. As Morrison and Crawford have noted, if the possibility of children is not considered during fieldwork, the evidence is likely to be either unappreciated or missed entirely. The children dimension has been further explored during the post-excavation. This map here shows the route of the public round the site and also often how schools use the site. The children in school groups tend to be local, though some schools regularly come from over 50 miles away, visiting on a full or at least half-day trip, and taking part in a structured learning experience supported by costumed interpreters, who lead various activities with the children. The children may have already been studying the Celts, until recently part of the Welsh national curriculum, or this may be seen as a visit of value in its own right. The children are organised and guided throughout, and they use different parts of the site for specific activities. Outside, there is approaching the site through the now partially reconstructed entrance, and inside it there is daubing of panels, various warrior associated activities, and looking at the exterior of the buildings. The interior of the large roundhouse, which is the top right and the bottom right, is mainly roped off and is normally only used to explain items on show and how they were used. And the smallest roundhouse is difficult to use for larger school parties because of its floor area, that's bottom left. Though it displays blacksmithing and is visited by smaller groups. A rectangular structure, top left, has traditionally been the site for basketry demonstrations because it's very light with one open long side. But the two excavated roundhouses form the focus for inside activities with the children, and this is where artefacts have largely accumulated and have now, thanks to our excavations, been recovered. The cookhouse has been used as a standard domestic residence with in a TV documentary, but it's set out to look like that the rest of the time, with various activities such as spinning, weaving and corn grinding and cooking frequently demonstrated. The evidence for children came from some sweet wrappers, but the most significant finds were of the face paint tins that were the evidence for the painting of Celtic designs on children's faces, either in the entrance to the house or immediately outside. The tins were found under the bed, which you see on the left-hand picture, but they became buried there at the rear of the roundhouse under gravel that had been brushed under the bed in house maintenance activities. That also shows how the houses were kept what appeared to be clean. In contrast, the darker Earthwatch house has normally been used for storytelling, and being larger and with concentric lines of benches can seat a larger party and enable full focus on the storyteller by the central hearth and provide a wet weather place to consume packed lunches, something which has turned out to be significant in our archaeological assemblage. The second group of children are usually on holiday as part of a family staying in a local caravan or holiday cottage for the week. And Castell Henllys is one of the flagship tourist attractions in the region that most visitors experience. Here the children may take part in some of the self-guided activities on their way to the promontory top reconstructions, but then explore the site, often rushing off and exploring independently, mediating archaeological and cultural information about the Iron Age through parents. The reconstructions provide, however, a stimulating environment for discovery and imaginative play, but the costumed interpreters, though present, play a less significant role. They do offer a human dimension and may encourage children to have a go at activities, but this is not so well structured and timed as it is for schools. The first analytical focus was on the plastic as a major component in the materials represented in the assemblage. A study of the artefacts with a particular interest in the plastic and plasticized items, such as sweet wrappers, has been published in antiquity, but the data can be used to investigate other issues. This is what we found on the cookhouse, and you can see there are lots of children-based items in the list at the bottom, which I'll come on to again in a minute. And this is what we have from the Earthwatch house, and the data we can now use to investigate other issues, for example the children's on-site presence, in more detail. I also use the material evidence to consider how the children behaved and where, and to what extent this reveals children's consumption patterns, and how in a few cases they may subvert the approved norms of behaviour in small forms of resistance and subversion. The evidence from the artefacts indicates both eating of sweets, which reflects child agency in the purchase and consumption preferences. Sweets are not on sale at the site shop, so they have to be brought to the site by the visitors. The other main component of the material, and indeed the dominant one, was the contents of packed lunches prepared by parents, but reflecting what was likely to be acceptable to their offspring. Children do have some, though limited, agency in what they'll accept in their lunches. I'm sure any parents listening to this will know that. This includes apple labels, many straws from drinks cartons, and plastic rings and tops from bottles, though no whole bottles. There are also yoghurt and various other pot lids, plastic spoons and cheese straw packaging. A large amount of cling film had probably been used to wrap the sandwiches and bread rolls which had been consumed, leaving no other trace. Some of the items, such as chocolate bars, may have been either in the pack-ups or purchased by the children, but many items can be assigned to one category or the other. Whilst most evidence for bars came from small torn-off corners, there's just one at the top left there, but there were hundreds and hundreds of those, some complete or near-complete wrappers were also recovered. Some rebellion against rules can be definitely identified with the Godzilla thermos wrapper, which had been deliberately stuffed between the wall and the benching, and the numerous can tabs that were designed to remain fixed to the cans, but which had been removed by repeated bending. We had no whole cans either, because they could easily be cleared away. Other finds were presumably unintended losses, like the glasses. We see at Castell Henllys an archaeological analysis of children's behaviour in the contemporary world, and in a particular context, that of a visit to a heritage site organised by either school or parents. In these contexts, children's toys were not anticipated as a diagnostic, and this was the case. Instead, we discovered evidence of the direct actions of children in the Earthwatch house and the byproducts of adult activity linked to the provision of children's face painting in the cookhouse. The latter took place outside, but the materials were stored and lost inside the roundhouse. In contrast, the Earthwatch data was structured by the arrangement of the interior space and the relatively dark peripheral zone where deliberate or accidental artefact loss was easiest, and it was most difficult for the litter to be seen and recovered. Archaeology does show that children were present in large numbers at Castell Henllys, and their archaeological imprint in terms of finds is truly impressive, if rather depressing, when we think about how the environment is being affected. So thank you for that.